looking everywhere, that's how the story goes. Grab your gear.
At the edge of Oakridge lies a forgotten crossroads where whispers claim the dead never truly rest. This is the Journal of the Dead, a haunting tale of love, betrayal, and a curse that bound the living to the grave. Leo never believed in ghost stories until guilt and grief led him to stop for a stranger one dark night. That stranger was Elara, a woman whose tragic death 50 years ago gave birth to a curse more powerful than anyone could imagine. Men who stopped to help her weren't rescuers at all. They became unwilling beacons, guiding the restless dead from the fields into town. Maria, brave and determined, and Leo, tormented by his past, uncovered the truth hidden in an old diary. Elara wasn't a monster. She was a victim, cursed to appear at the crossroads, her sorrow feeding an army of the undead. The zombies weren't her servants. They were drawn to the broken souls who tried to protect her. But forgiveness can be stronger than fear. In this story, horror is not just about the dead rising from the earth, but about the weight of guilt and the desperate hope for peace. The Journal of the Dead isn't just a zombie tale. It's a story of redemption, of love beyond death, and the chilling price of a curse that refused to fade. Dare to listen and step into the crossroads where the dead still wait.
The undead likely know. Join the hunt, uncover the fight. In the zombie story zone, we'll survive the night.
Everyone in the small town of Oakridge knew the story. Some laughed it off as a tale for campfires, a way to scare reckless teenagers into behaving. But beneath the laughter, there lingered an unease. People avoided that road after dark, and when they had no choice but to pass, they kept their eyes forward and their windows locked. Because at the crossroads outside of town, under the lone, flickering streetlight, something waited. They said a woman in white appeared there at midnight. Her figure was pale, her beauty haunting. If you stopped, she would climb into your car, and that would be the last anyone ever saw of you. Leo had heard the whispers since he arrived in Oakridge a month ago. He didn't believe them. He was a man of grease-stained hands and clanking tools, a mechanic who trusted bolts and metal more than shadows and myths. Ghosts weren't real. At least, that's what he told himself. But that night, driving home from the garage, his grief was heavy. He had moved here to escape memories of his brother's accident, but pain had a way of following, slipping into the cracks of silence. Distracted, he missed his usual turn, and the road stretched unfamiliar beneath his headlights. The dashboard clock ticked midnight, and then he saw her. She stood beneath the streetlight, motionless yet fragile, like a painting trembling in the wind. Her long dark hair whipped across her pale face, and her white dress clung to her as if it didn't belong in this world. Leo's gut told him to keep driving, to let the legend remain just that. But then he noticed the tears tracing her cheeks, glinting in the headlights. She looked human, helpless. His heart, despite the warning bells in his mind, softened. He slowed, pulled up beside her, and rolled down his window. "Hey," he said gently, "are you okay? Do you need a ride?" The woman turned toward him. Her eyes were deep pools of sorrow, ancient yet vulnerable. "Please," she whispered, her voice trembling. "They're coming." Her name was Elara. That was all she gave him, her voice so soft it was almost carried away by the hum of the engine. She spoke little after that, her gaze locked on the darkness beyond the window. Her shoulders quivered as though she felt a cold that the heater could not touch. Leo gripped the wheel, his eyes flicking to her every few seconds. Something about her unsettled him, yet he couldn't turn her away. "Who's coming?" he asked, trying to keep his voice steady, though unease tightened his chest. Elara did not answer with words. Instead, she laid her hand on his arm. The chill of her touch seeped straight into his bones, unnatural, lifeless. "You have to go faster," she whispered. Before Leo could question her, a heavy thump shook the roof of the car. His breath caught. Then came another, louder, like fists or feet pounding from above. Panic clawed at him. He slammed the brakes, tires screeching on the lonely road. The headlights painted a nightmare. Figures emerged from the shadows. Dozens, maybe more. Their movements were all wrong, stiff and jerky, like marionettes pulled by invisible strings. Torn clothing hung from their bodies, and their faces, gaunt, pale, hollow-eyed, were twisted with hunger. Zombies. Leo's pulse thundered. He threw the car into reverse, desperate to carve an escape, But in his rearview mirror, more shapes stumbled from the dark. They were boxed in, trapped. "I'm sorry," Elara whispered. Her tone carried a sorrow so deep it seemed to belong to centuries, not moments. Then, the impossible happened. The zombies froze. Their hungry eyes no longer searched for Leo. They were locked on Elara. She turned to him, her gaze shimmering with regret, with something almost human yet not. "Forgive me," she breathed. Before Leo could stop her, she pushed open the door and stepped into the night. The horde parted for her like a tide obeying the moon. One by one, they followed, shuffling after her into the blackness. Leo remained in the driver's seat, gripping the wheel with white knuckles, his breath ragged, alone, and utterly shaken. No one believed Leo. When he stumbled into the Oakridge police station at dawn, pale and trembling, the officers exchanged looks of annoyance and pity. To them, he was just another outsider who had drunk too much and let the local ghost stories get into his head. Bad, but the sheriff wasn't so quick to dismiss him. Maria Vargas was a woman of grit, sharp eyes set in a face weathered by years of keeping this quiet town safe. She had heard the stories too, but for her they weren't just myths. Her deputy, a young man named Carter, had disappeared near that very crossroads 6 months ago. His cruiser was found abandoned, his radio cracked on the ground, his body never recovered. When Leo spoke of Elara, of the horde of pale figures, Maria listened. She didn't interrupt, only narrowed her eyes and leaned forward. The next day, she returned with evidence. From a farm 2 miles away, she'd pulled grainy security footage. In the distance, headlights flared, Leo's car. The timestamp struck midnight. At first, the road was empty. Then, for only a few frames, a blur of white shimmered beside his vehicle, too bright and too vague to be human. And after that, shapes. Dozens of them, lurching out of the shadows. It was real. When she confronted Leo, she didn't bother with small talk. She stood across from him, arms crossed, her voice firm but not unkind. "You're the first person to ever come back from that crossroads," she said. "Why do you think she let you live?" Leo swallowed, unable to answer. The memory of Elara's face haunted him, the sadness in her eyes, the way her voice had carried centuries of sorrow. She hadn't seemed like a monster. She had seemed trapped. And despite the fear gnawing at his chest, Leo felt something else blooming inside him. A pull. A need. Not just to survive, but to understand her. Leo was no longer the same man who had first driven through Oakridge's quiet streets. The memory of Elara gnawed at him like a splinter lodged too deep to pull free. Her pale face, her trembling words, the sorrow in her eyes. He replayed them endlessly in his mind. She wasn't like the creatures that followed her. She wasn't mindless. She was something else, something trapped. The obsession consumed him. His small apartment became a nest of chaos. Maps pinned across the walls, scribbled notes trailing from page to page, theories connected with red string, like the case of a mad detective. He circled the date and time of her appearance over and over again. Midnight, Crossroads. Work at the garage was forgotten. Friends stopped calling. He hardly ate, surviving on bitter coffee and restless determination. Maria found him one evening crouched beside his car. He was bolting sheets of steel to the doors, stuffing weapons into the trunk. Crowbars, fuel cans, even a rusted shotgun he had no real experience using. "Leo," Maria snapped, her voice sharp in the cool night air. "This is suicide." He looked up, his eyes hollow yet burning with conviction. "She's not a monster, Maria." "I saw her eyes. She's a prisoner. What if she's the key to stopping all of this?" Maria's jaw tightened. For years, she had treated Elara as nothing more than a curse on Oakridge, the bait that lured men to their doom. Hatred came easy. But in Leo's voice, she heard something more than madness. Grief, loss, and a desperate need for meaning. She thought of her deputy, Carter, swallowed by that same road months ago. His face flashed before her, and her anger gave way to grim understanding. "If you're going," Maria said at last, her tone iron hard, "you're not going alone." Leo's shoulders sagged in relief. For the first time in weeks, he wasn't alone in his obsession. The decision was made. Tomorrow at midnight, they would return to the crossroads. The night was cold and still when Leo and Maria returned to the crossroads. The lonely streetlight buzzed faintly, casting its pale glow over cracked asphalt and weeds swaying in the wind. The place felt wrong, as if the air itself resisted their presence. Maria crouched low in the brush, her rifle braced against her shoulder, every nerve alert. She was a woman of grit, but even she felt the weight of something unnatural pressing in around them. Leo stood by his car, his hands shaking though his face was set with determination. His heart pounded with a mixture of fear and longing. He wasn't here to hunt or kill. He was here to see her again. When the dashboard clock struck midnight, the world seemed to pause. And then Elara appeared. She stepped into the circle of light, her white dress rippling as if caught in a wind no one else could feel. Her face, pale and sorrowful, turned toward Leo. For the first time, her expression changed. Not sadness, not fear, but surprise. "You came back," she said softly, her voice trembling like glass. "Why?" Leo took a step closer, his breath visible in the cold. "To understand. To help you." Her lips trembled and tears glistened down her cheeks. "You can't help me, please. Leave before they come." The night split open with groans. Low at first, then rising like a chorus of hunger. From the tree line, the horde emerged, dozens of pale, broken bodies, shuffling toward the light, their hollow eyes fixed on the living. But this time, something was different. Their movements sharpened, their groans grew harsher. They weren't just circling Leo's car, they had noticed Maria's hiding place. Elara's eyes widened with horror as the creatures turned, their staggering steps quickening, their snarls growing louder. The horde was no longer after Leo. They were hunting the sheriff. The horde surged toward the bushes, snarling, their pale faces twisted with hunger. Maria steadied her rifle and fired. The crack of the shot echoed through the night, dropping the first creature in a spray of ash and dust. She fired again, but there were too many. For every one that fell, 3 more stumbled forward, their hands clawing through the air. "Maria!" Leo shouted, his voice breaking. He spun toward Elara, desperation burning in his eyes. "Stop them! Please!" For a moment, she stood frozen, torn between fear and sorrow. Then Elara lifted her trembling hands. Her eyes fluttered shut, and a soft glow began to gather around her. A pulse of energy burst outward, rippling through the air like a shockwave. The ground itself seemed to shiver. The horde faltered. Dozens of snarling mouths fell silent, their heads snapping back as if struck. Their bodies stiffened, locked in place, caught in Elara's unseen grip. Maria lowered her rifle, stunned. "What in God's name?" Elara's voice rang out, raw and strained. "Run! I can't hold them long!" Leo grabbed Maria's arm, pulling her from her daze. They sprinted to the car, boots pounding against the cracked asphalt. The engine roared to life, and with a spray of gravel, the vehicle shot down the road. In the rearview mirror, Leo's eyes caught one last glimpse. Elara collapsed to her knees, her glowing hands dropping to the dirt. The horde, once feral, gathered around her. But they didn't attack. They lingered close, swaying, almost protective. Some reached toward her with trembling hands, not to harm, but to steady her, as though she were their queen, or their prisoner. Then, in eerie silence, the creatures turned back toward the trees. Together, they vanished into the darkness. Elara carried at their center like a fallen idol. Leo's hands tightened on the wheel, his chest heaved, torn between terror and the unbearable pull of guilt. She had saved them, and the price had been her. The answers lay buried in the past. Leo and Maria spent days combing through Oakridge's dusty archives, the smell of mold and old paper clinging to their clothes. The records were brittle, handwritten accounts from a time when stories traveled faster than facts. Yet, piece by piece, the truth began to surface. 50 years ago, a young woman named Elara Monroe had lived in Oakridge. Her name appeared in town registers. Her photograph, black and white, grainy, still carried the soft grace Leo remembered in her face. But her story was one of tragedy. She had been betrayed by her lover after a violent quarrel. He abandoned her at the Crossroads at midnight, leaving her alone in the darkness. Witnesses spoke of shouting, of a woman crying in the night. And then, the end. Elara struck down by a truck that never managed to stop in time. She died instantly, her blood staining the lonely road. But her death wasn't the end. Maria uncovered a local myth that had grown in the years after. They called her La Llorona, the weeping woman, a restless spirit bound forever to the place where her life had been stolen. The most chilling discovery came not from official records, but from a forgotten leather-bound diary in the evidence room. It belonged to the truck driver. His handwriting trembled across the final page. "I see her every night. She waits for me. I have to go back. I have to apologize. It was my fault." He vanished the next day, never seen again. Maria read aloud, her voice low. The pieces clicked together with horrifying clarity. Elara wasn't hunting men. She was trapped, cursed to appear night after night. The ones who stopped weren't victims of seduction. They were victims of empathy. The guilt-ridden, the broken-hearted, the protectors, men like Leo. Their emotions lit a beacon, summoning the dead buried in the soil of the old battlefield beneath Oakridge. The zombies weren't following Elara. They were following the living souls drawn helplessly to her. And Leo, with his grief and his need to save, was her strongest beacon yet. The truth had cut through Leo like a blade. At last, he understood why Elara had appeared to him that night, why she had let him live when so many others had vanished into the dark. It wasn't random chance. It was him. His guilt. The weight of his brother's death was a chain he had carried for years, a wound that never healed. On that first night, when he saw Elara's tears on the lonely road, his grief had answered hers. Two broken souls had recognized each other. That was the bond. That was the curse. Elara wasn't a monster. She wasn't some seductress calling men to their doom. She was a tragedy made flesh, bound to repeat her death in endless sorrow. The ones who stopped weren't prey. They were mirrors, drawn by their own regret. Their guilt acted like a beacon, summoning the restless dead, making them believe they were her protectors, even as they led the horde. Leo couldn't let it go on. If anyone could break the curse, it had to be him. Maria found him that night, his apartment scattered with maps, journals, and weapons he no longer needed. He was calm now, too calm, as though he had already made peace with what he was about to do. "This is madness," Maria said sharply, her eyes blazing. "It's a curse, Leo! You can't just walk up and fix it with kindness." Leo gave a weary smile, tightening the strap of his jacket. "I'm not gonna hug her, Maria." He met her gaze, his own steady with resolve. "I'm gonna forgive her." For a moment, Maria stood silent, the weight of his words sinking in. She wanted to drag him back, to tell him curses didn't break with forgiveness. But in her gut, she knew Leo's mind was set. Tomorrow at midnight, he would return to the Crossroads. Not to fight. Not to run, but to set her free. The wind was sharp that night, carrying with it the lonely rattle of leaves skittering across cracked asphalt. Leo stood at the crossroads for the third time, his hands clenched at his sides, his heart pounding not with fear, but with resolve. The old streetlight flickered above him, its glow casting long, restless shadows. Maria waited in the brush, her rifle gripped tight. She had sworn she would protect him, but deep down, she knew this was something a weapon couldn't fight. This was between Leo and the ghost that haunted the town. When the clock struck 12, the air shifted. Elara emerged from the darkness, her form less solid than before. She looked fragile, as though the world itself was forgetting her. Her dress fluttered like mist, her face pale and drawn. "You have to stop coming," she begged, her voice breaking. "I don't want your death on my soul." Leo took a step closer, steady and calm. "I'm not here to protect you. I'm not here to fight them. I'm here to tell you the truth. It's not your fault." The ground stirred. From the fields and forest around them, groans rose. Pale, broken bodies began to climb from the earth, their movements jerky, their eyes glowing faintly. Yet something was different this time. Their steps were slow, hesitant, as though they too were listening. "Elara," Leo continued, his voice carrying through the night, "the man who left you here. His guilt bound you to this place. The truck driver's guilt chained him to your memory. My guilt, it drew me to you. But it ends now. You don't need to carry this anymore. We forgive you." Her lips trembled, her tears glistening in the light. Slowly, she reached forward, her cold, trembling hand finding his. The moment their hands touched, the groans fell silent. The horde froze, watching. The air itself seemed to hold its breath. For the first time in 50 years, Elara did not look like a ghost. She looked like a woman. A warm, golden light began to glow from the place where Leo's hand touched Elara's. It spread like sunrise over her fragile figure, softening the edges of her ghostly form. For the first time since her death, her lips curved into a genuine smile, a smile of peace, not sorrow. "Thank you," she whispered, her voice clear and free of the weight that had bound her for 50 years. Her body shimmered, dissolving into the light as though she were finally being welcomed home. Around them, the groans of the dead faltered. The zombies who had risen from their graves for decades suddenly stilled. The eerie hunger faded from their eyes, replaced with bewilderment. One by one, they looked down at their own broken hands, their cracked faces softening into expressions of release. Then, without pain or violence, they collapsed into dust, the wind carrying them away like scattered ash. The curse was broken. The Crossroads stood silent, nothing more than an ordinary intersection under the night sky. For the first time in years, it was just quiet. Weeks passed, and Oakridge returned to life. The whispers of the weeping woman became nothing more than a local legend again, told in hushed tones to thrill children, while the adults finally felt safe walking the roads after dark. Leo, too, began to heal. The guilt he had carried for so long was no longer a chain. He found himself breathing easier, lighter than he had in years. Then, on a bright afternoon, a stranger arrived in town. She had long, dark hair that caught the sun and kind, gentle eyes that felt strangely familiar. She took a job at the local cafe, quiet but always smiling. One morning, Leo stepped inside for coffee. Their eyes met. For a moment, the world stilled. There was recognition, something unspoken, deep and peaceful. She did not remember crossroads or curses. She was simply a woman with a second chance. The twist was never about horror. It was about forgiveness. Leo's selfless act hadn't just freed Elara's spirit, it had given her life again. And now, perhaps, something new could finally begin. Oakridge never forgot the legend of the Crossroads. For generations, whispers of the weeping woman had haunted its people, but now the tale carried a different ending. No longer was it only a warning of sorrow and death, it became a story of redemption, of forgiveness stronger than any curse. Leo often walked past the Crossroads at night. Where once he had felt fear and heavy guilt, he now felt calm. The wind no longer carried cries, the ground no longer stirred with restless dead. The place was simply earth and road again, nothing more. Yet deep inside, he knew something extraordinary had happened there, something few would ever truly believe. At the cafe, the woman with the dark hair laughed softly as she served coffee to the townsfolk. She was just another face in Oakridge now, but when her eyes met Leo's, there was always a spark, a quiet recognition that belonged only to them. Neither pushed for answers. They didn't need to. Some things are meant to remain unspoken, alive only in the heart. And so the story of Elara became more than a ghost story. It became a reminder that guilt can chain us, but forgiveness, whether given or received, has the power to break any curse. Here, at the Zombie Story Zone, we've seen horror, sorrow, and shadows. But tonight, we end with peace and the haunting truth that sometimes, even in the darkest legends, love and forgiveness can bring the dead back to life.
Welcome to the Zombie Story Zone, where the tales of the undead rightly known. Join the hunt, uncover the fight in the Zombie Story Zone. We'll survive the night.